do, just scan the QR code and this will lead you to Slido. You just put your questions, and if you're shy or worried, I think that there's an anonymous, so you can send it anonymously, and then we will be answering them in the Q&A portion. So do you guys okay, so this is our guest speaker, Tanya. She's so nice. I love her. So she has a Master's of Science in International Development Management from the University of Westminster. And then she has almost 10 years of experience in the development sector and currently works as a senior program officer at the Australian Embassy in the Philippines. So let's all give a round of applause for Tanya.
Hi everyone. Okay, so please give me a moment. I'll just be sharing my screen. Oops. Okay, what do you see? Okay. All right, are you able to see my screen? Can I get a thumbs up or something? All right, cool. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for having me here today. It's a Saturday, it's a weekend, and it seems like JP mentioned you guys should be reviewing. So really appreciate your presence here. Okay, so perhaps many of you are here because you're curious about the development sector or thinking about how you can do good using your careers. Actually, way back when I was in high school and university, I didn't even know that the development sector existed, but I knew that I wanted my career to be focused on serving the people and the planet. So I hope this talk helps you in letting you know more about the development sector, how it fits into effective altruism, and I'll be talking more about that later, and how to get you started if you are interested enough. So let me begin by telling you about effective altruism. So especially if it's your first time to hear about it, because I saw that we have some special guests, we actually encourage people to think deeply about their careers. Effective altruism is a philosophy, and it is also a social movement that advocates using evidence and reason to figure out how we can help others as much as possible and to take action on that basis. So the philosophy is guided by the view of not just merely doing good or making a difference, but thinking about how we can do the most good or the most difference. So the effective altruism movement does research in finding out what activities can do the most good by using good evidence and careful reasoning and then acting on that basis. So in EA, we also always ask the question, with limited time and resources, how can we do the most good that we can? So in answering this, and to figure out how the development sector and planning our careers contributes into doing good, I will be talking about two main ideas behind EA. So the first main idea is that some problems need more attention and resources than others. So EA uses a framework with three factors in ranking different problems. So this is scale, solvability, and neglectedness. So let me talk about each one. So scale asks about how many and how badly are the people or the beings being affected. So it pertains to the number of individuals affected now or even in the future, as well as the severity of that effect. And this also shows that working on bigger problems can also lead to bigger impact. Second is solvability. So solvability is the measure of how easily we can actually make a difference. So it's either making some headway on the problem by solving it completely, or if, because in a way, if there are no solutions that we can access, the problem is likely not solvable, and that might make our efforts not that impactful. So by working on problems or doubling down the efforts on certain problems that are solvable means that there is a greater chance of impact. And finally, neglectedness. So this is about how much resources are already being put into certain solutions or interventions. So if an issue is neglected, it often means that each additional person who works on that problem can actually have a greater chance of making an impact because no one or not a lot of people are working on it. So, it's harder to make a notable difference if you pour in a lot of more resources into problems that are already getting the support that they need. So you might not have a marginal effect in the long run. So you're probably better off helping problems that is getting lesser attention. So overall, we recommend achieving a balance of these factors when we think about problems that we want to solve. It's not easy, but there are ways that we could think through this. All right. So based on this framework, here are the main problems that are prioritized by the EA community. So first is alleviating poverty and promoting development, improving animal welfare, helping future generations, and also building the EA community. Sorry, I think I hear some background noise. Is that from someone? Okay, it's gone. All right. Can everyone hear me now? All right. Okay,
Sounds
great.
clear.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. All right. So these are basically the cost areas or the problems that the EA community believes as of the moment that we should be focusing on. So let me also discuss each one of these problems. So under global poverty, there are still around 700 million people around the world that are suffering in poverty below the poverty line, which is $1.90 a day. And many of them actually suffer from very preventable diseases. And now that we have the COVID pandemic, a lot of the development organizations have said that this has increased now during the pandemic and are even more susceptible to easily preventable diseases. We also consider local poverty in the Philippines as one of the most pressing problems right now. So here we have around 6 million who are still living in extreme poverty, and most of them are actually in Mindanao. The government, compared to other lower and middle class income countries, do not spend as much in terms of social assistance. And the Philippines, more or less, is implementing interventions that are found to be effective, such as cash transfer. So looking at this, we still find that local poverty is a cost area that Filipinos can also work on. Now, for the next cost area or problem, we have animal welfare. This might be new to some of you, but it is about not necessarily companion animals like we said before, like cats and dogs, but all types of animals. And in EA, we also believe in the easing the suffering of other beings. So each year around the world, there are about 60 billion plus land animals alone that are raised and slaughtered in factory farms globally. And most of them really experience hideous conditions, and they experience really bad levels of suffering. The problem is quite neglected because only around $20 million is spent on this. And with the pandemic, we also learned that, these substandard conditions could be a factor in contributing to the mutation of new diseases. So the scale of the problem is quite high, but it is also highly neglected. Another problem area that might also be new to you is looking into different risks faced by future generations and different species. And we call them some existential threats. So this could mean, preventing warfare between countries. This could be ensuring that artificial intelligence that is developed today would not cause harm now and in the future. And lastly, that we prevent the risk of climate change and its extreme effects. So within the EA movement, there is an estimation that human extinction in the next century is between 1 to 20%. So some notable members say that, it could be actually be lesser than that, but nevertheless, anything that is, at 0.1% is still a great loss for us in humanity. And these threats are quite neglected. Now, the fourth problem area is about building the EA community. So, this is not more of like a self promotion, but just really saying that, we think that building the EA community can also be a priority, because if we do want to have the most good happen in the world, promoting that mindset of doing the most effective that you can could be, impactful exponentially. So effective altruism can guide a lot of people in terms of how they create an impact by using their career, making up their projects or using their resources to have the most impact. Okay, so that's the fourth. Now, on to the second idea. So, the second idea is that people should think about how they can maximize their careers to do the most good and try to aim for high impact careers. So, when we talk about making the most difference or the most good, we think about using our careers as one of the ways to do that. So, it was said earlier on, people might have different strategies, but among those strategies, we think that using your career could be one of the best ones because there is an estimated 80,000 hours of our life that could be spent in our work. So we have to make each moment of that count. In one of the talks given by one of our co-founders, Brian Tan, he shared some reasons why you should, think about this deeply as well. So first is, you'll be happier at your job and in your life in general. So 80,000 Hours is an organization that looks into these high impact careers, and they identified six factors that makes up a dream job or, a job that could be very fulfilling. So these factors are, having an engaging work that help others, work you're good at, having supportive colleagues in a supportive environment, there are no downsides or anything harmful in your work environment. And it's a work that can fit your personal circumstances or your personal life at the moment. So you can see here that, having work that helps others is one of the factors that can make sure that, you'll be happier at your job and in your life, considering how much hours you're going to put into it. Um, Another thing is that you have a privilege and duty to help those less fortunate than you. So most of you are already in university. You are already in a position to maximize your career because you have a quality of education that is not available to almost everyone. And also being enrolled in the SAL already puts you in quite of a position of privilege. And so it kind of makes it a duty on your part to use that privilege for the good of others. And even if you'd be, like a fresh graduate, you will be far better off than other people. So just to give an example, one of the EA aligned organizations, Giving What You Can, has this kind of calculator. So let's say you graduate, you live alone, and you earn at least 20,000 per month, which is not so far from the minimum wage, unfortunately. You are actually richer than 16% of the world. So this means that you have, some resources that might be disposable. So, but this is just in an income aspect. Of course, there are other aspects of well-being that might hinder you or make you more well-placed to help others. But, this is just to give you that sense that the world has progressed so far, and then you as university students in like one of the top universities in Asia um, is in a position to also get a good career that can help others. And then third is that you can make 10 to 10 times more positive impact than other people. So in EA, because we use, careful reasoning and evidence on how to be most effective, there are different types of careers that may be available to you to do the most good because you can use that set of skills to help others in solving a problem that is very impactful, that's tractable, and that could be neglected. So this is just a funny comic strip that usually goes around the EA circle, that looks into Superman who would, probably help one person at a time or occasionally, but there's really so much more that Superman can do. Like, for example, contribute in sustainable energy, something like that. So something to think about as well. So that's it. So that's the second point. Now in this next part, I would like to show you how my journey was like. But based on my previous discussion, we learned that Filipinos can actually make the most out of their careers because the development sector and alleviating poverty or promoting global development is such an important cost area, and that careers um, careers that are high impact and where you can do the most good would make your contribution to improving the world much more than, let's say, considering other careers. So again, this is more to invite you to think about that and to encourage you to be open minded and look at your options that are available to you that could be impactful. And that's basically what I went through as well, like looking at those options for me when I got into the development sector. So, how was my journey like? So, since you're university students, I feel a bit shy about this, but I thought about, doing like a trip down memory lane and how I was when I was in university. So you can tell this is in the UP Sunken Garden. So when I was at your age, I guess, so this is me, I think, junior year. I was very service oriented. My degree was in sociology. It made me look into various social and institutional problems in the country and the world. I was very motivated to make a difference and I volunteered in different organizations and causes. And at the time, there was very little encouragement or opportunity for me to seriously think about careers. We weren't encouraged to take internships. Maybe there was like one or two career talks. And as a sociology graduate, the options for me were quite big at that time. Um, but then come graduation, the real world went calling, and then yeah, this is me. I suddenly had to get a job. So I was a bit of in a panic. I really didn't know what to do. Um, but yeah, I guess I just found ways to figure out myself. So the first thing I did was actually go into the private sector. So, I graduated with honors. I had leadership skills, but I still didn't know what to do with those skills. And where my talents fit. So I decided to join a management trainee program with a financial services company. And for 12 months, we were immersed in different functions of a company, hoping that maybe, I will gain skills and then figure things out in the end. And then, true enough, I realized that I actually excelled in research. I wanted to do strategic planning and project management. So it was kind of a self discovery journey for me. But after that, after my stint in the private sector, I later on decided that I wanted to, have more impact. And there was an opportunity for me to work in the government. So I worked in the Department of Social Welfare and Development as an executive assistant. And I was reporting directly to the secretary at the time. And I oversaw policy and planning, institutional development, administration, finance. So it was all areas supporting our operations. And it was in government work that I came more embedded in the development sector and really learned what it was like. So, but after that, in 2016, there was a change in administration and I had to leave my post. So thankfully, I had a chance to study abroad and take my master's in international development, still an area I was interested in. And I chose this course because I recognized that I was really more of a generalist and interested in making development programs more efficient and effective. And it was actually in the UK where I learned about effective altruism, and this was the book that I got, which is Doing Good Better. And it just really resonated with me and something that I wanted to apply in my career later on. So I went back to the Philippines and applied this in my work as an independent consultant in the development sector. And I did project management research for these local and international orgs. Um, so I was working directly with some communities to do research, monitoring, evaluation. I did some consultancy work with other international organizations like the Asian Development Bank, Save the Children, Red Cross, in their programs and projects. Eventually, I decided to join the Australian Embassy, which is a bilateral development cooperation partner of the Philippines, working on one of their policy development programs, which is Coalitions for Change. And yeah, that's where I am at right now. And you can ask me about more on that later. So that was my journey like. So as you can see, it's really not a straight path. It was really a journey of self-discovery. Now that I've been in the development sector for 10 years now, I've had some learnings that, I wish I knew when I was starting out. And if you're interested in the sector, and I hope these could also help you. So when I tell most people that I work in the development sector, they actually give me a puzzled look. They sometimes think it's for real estate development or like software development, which is totally not the case. So in an attempt to define the industry or the sector, I would describe it as, a sector that is comprised of individuals and organizations working together, creating and promoting sustainable growth and social progress in our society. Okay, so that might be a bit daunting. The definition sounds too broad, and it is because the first thing that I will tell you about the development sector is that it covers a range of problems. You can talk about poverty, climate change and disasters, social justice, health, conflict, wars, and even economic growth. So if you want to work in the sector, you have to break it down and you have to discover what specific problems related to development you want to work on. Um, so here in the Philippines, we think that working on health, including mental health or poverty reduction or things related to poverty reduction, such as economic growth, might be areas that people could focus on. But just to say that all of these are also related in some way. So we say this because the health sector, for example, has a good record of reliable evidence to back up whether their interventions are effective or not. Poverty reduction is a bit more complicated, if not the most complicated, because interventions can be broken down into macro approaches, like looking at institutions, looking at economic growth, looking at systems in society, and you also have micro interventions such as interventions that directly benefit beneficiaries, which are more measurable in terms of results. So there is still that range. So just to recap, it is a sector, but it is also composed of different sectors. Next, it is a process and it is multidisciplinary. So, because it is a process and it is multidisciplinary enough, there can be a role for you. So while there are courses in development studies, you don't necessarily need to have a development studies degree. Actually, you can have a psychology degree, you can have an engineering degree, a computer science degree, to be able to contribute in the sector, because development has technical, administrative, and political aspects to it. So most problems in the development sector need the expertise of people from specialized fields as well as generalists who can work with local knowledge and communities and putting these things together. So there is a space for experts who can give us quality evidence and create useful tools and solutions. Then you need professionals who can support organizations with systems and strategies to implement these effective interventions. You also need to communicate and build relationships with community builders and community leaders who can direct these technical outputs and the strategic advice into feasible and workable projects that communities and your partners can actually understand and implement themselves. I think over the registration, there was a question on what um, what roles are actually neglected in the international development space. There was one study that I found who actually looked into this, and it was done by the very managing director of Effective Altruism. This is just a study based on the cohort of Harvard graduates in international development management. So I wouldn't say it is representative of our context or what's available in the Philippines, but it's a framework that I think we could use. And I'm just sharing some of her findings. So here it said that at least the most neglected are the ones that look into fostering economic productivity and also developing state capabilities or institutions. It is also very neglected in this space, looking at catastrophic risk or pandemic preparedness, which we now know is, yes, it's quite neglected. And also meta research on how talent in global development could actually be used. And then global health is surely low in terms of neglectedness around the world, but intractability and scale, it is very high. And then you also have other careers that, according to her study, might not be as recommended as possible. So these are those running RCTs and social enterprises, only because they feel that it has lower impact or is again not neglected, not really that neglected. So I have not done the same analysis in our own development sector, but it's something that I think we should also do as well. So let's see about that. Um, Okay, so again, it is a process and multidisciplinary. There should be and could be a role for you, and it also comes in several shapes and sizes. So what do I mean about this? So there are different types of organizations in the sector, and I'll be running through them. And when you talk about the development sector, most of the time it's NGOs or nonprofits that you think about, but there's really a lot more to it than that. So first, talking about the nonprofit sector or civil society, you have them. So they can be international or local. They usually implement the programs directly, and some of the examples are on your screen. You also have private foundations that usually do give grants to the smaller organizations. So it could be international or local as well, but it's mostly run by private entities. These are corporations, it could be family foundations, and they normally also receive their own funding or raise their own funding as well. Another example are development agencies or donor or aid agencies. That's not usually used right now, but just to um, make it more familiar, I guess. So these are donor agencies. You have multilaterals and bilateral organizations. So multilaterals are usually your international organizations where state governments actually contribute. These are mostly your UNs, your WHO, your World Food Programs. Sorry if I use acronyms, but if anything there is not known, yeah, just put it in the chat. And you also have bilateral organizations or development cooperation between different countries. So an example is where I am at right now. So the Australian embassy or the Australian government gives a portion of their taxes as aid to developing countries such as the Philippines, and we help manage that foreign aid. Um, then you have think tanks, third-party research organizations, or consulting agencies or independent consultants. So they mostly conduct research on programs and policies related to development that will be used by these donor agencies or these implementing orgs. And you are mainly advising and not entirely accountable for the results of the project, but you give them strategic advice. And these are just some of the sample organizations that we have. And then lastly, not to forget, the biggest entity I think there is now in the Philippines in terms of development is the government. By far, they still have the most resources. Um, and this is also broken down. You can work on in departments or the executive agencies, those that actually sets policies and implements the programs. You have congressional offices. They work on laws. You monitor the implementation of the programs, and you also have the power of the purse. You actually set the budget in terms of what the government can spend or not. And then you have local government. So these are your cities or municipalities and even up to your barangay level. So you could be involved in development all throughout government. So that's it. So that's what when we talk about those different sizes. And just to note, in terms of income opportunities, you're probably wondering, okay, how much will I earn if I join those organizations? And the answer is it really varies. So because since there are different types of organizations, they have different capacities. So an entry level position can depend on what type of organization you are joining. Typically, though, technical roles that I mentioned earlier, they're normally paid higher. And also, if you get a management role or an international job posting, that is also comparatively higher. Okay. And then lastly, here are some of the skills which I think could be essential in terms of when you join the development sector. So there are still a range of roles. I'm not saying that this is all that you need, but these are good building blocks to enter the space. So it deals with a lot of problems when you talk about development, because the goal of development is to really be obsolete, to not to have work in the sector any longer, because at some point we've at least solved most of the problems. So these problems can also be emotionally triggering. It's high stress. So the ability to turn our compassion into effective action is needed, and that should be guided by critical thinking and finding out the best solution. So a good problem solving attitude or mindset is needed. I also think that baseline skills on building relationships are helpful because most of the time you have to work with different people and different stakeholders. And together with that, you also need to be adaptable and flexible in your working style because since these are problems, things can change at different times. And you're testing out programs that might not have, doesn't really have hard to also track, let's say, their impact right away. So there could be a lot of testing and iterations on what could work or not. So we have to be ready to adjust against changing socioeconomic and political landscapes as well to ensure that goals are still met by the policy or program that you are trying to implement. So just keep these things in mind. Again, for me at least, these are essential skills that the development sector would welcome. So that's it. So just a recap of all those 4 points and how the development sector has been for me like. And then, okay, I'm just thinking if I have time. Okay. Yeah. So all of this might, be overwhelming, but I still hope I give you a good idea of what it is like. Um, so now you might be asking, so okay, how do I get started? How do I begin? So here are a few things that I would like to share on how you can get started. And it really starts with you. So see if the development sector to begin with is something that you are up for, because you need to find out what types of problems you really want to solve or contribute in. And I said earlier, working in development is just one of the many pressing problems that we have around us. So take time to research on the development sector problems that we mentioned or that concerns you and see whether this is really something you want to contribute to. So you can rank these problems using the framework that I presented earlier. And for local development problems, you might want to read on like the Philippine Institute for Development Studies or for the Center for Global Development and follow websites like, from the United Nations and talking about the sustainable development goals and see, what type of problem you really want to work on. Second, inventory your, set of skills. As I said, there's a range of roles available to you, but it could be primarily technical, it could be primarily administrative, it could be political. So these roles require different sets of skills, and you need to find out what is more suited for you. But I'm also saying that, some people might not know where they are actually good at. So a tip that I would give is that, one way to know what skills you are good at and what you enjoy doing is to keep a diary of your tasks and see what your energy levels are. How did you perform in this your results and what your general attitude in doing those types of tasks. And you might be able to find out where you excel at or what you enjoy the most. And third is determine what work environment or organization do you want to be part of. Are you comfortable working in international teams or local teams? Do you like to work in a big or small organization? Because big organization means there are really big some rules that you have to follow and templates have to follow. But if you want to be more innovative, maybe there is more space in that in smaller organizations. So something to think about as well. Next step is also to explore. So I would invite you to, I am just one representative of the sector, but there are others out there talking about it. So check career reviews and testimonials, and even talk to professionals on the field. And since you are still early in your career and you lack the work experience, one of the best ways is to learn people who have that experience. So you can ask them about what skills they found essential, what they found important to work on, and also organizational culture of the workplaces, which could matter to you. And lastly, we would invite you to also take action. So consider putting this into a plan. We have a template for career planning if you're interested. Use this to guide your reflection, identify your options, and you can even use it to track your progress. So when I was thinking about my options, I also used the 80,000 hours guide. And this is also based off from that, what EA Philippines has. Second is, try it out for yourself. So when you have some good options or, already like a problem area you wanted to solve, you might want to seek out internships or volunteer for organizations who are working on this. Because in that way, you get to have a feel of it and you can even build your career capital. So at this point, career capital refers to the skills, connections, credentials, and even, available financial resources if there are that can help you have a bigger impact in the future. But, you have to seek them out. And then lastly, I would also recommend to get a mentorship. So I've had good bosses so far. So I think I've been really, really lucky. So mentors don't exactly give you things, on a plate, give you opportunities right away. What they're there for you to do is to, help you clarify your plans, help you connect the dots and see whether there is good reasoning in your ways forward and to help you, just to motivate you and help you in your progress in achieving your goals. EA has a mentorship program. So if you're interested in that, we can also share about that later. But even in your schools with your professors, I'm sure there's someone that you can reach out to, probably seek a mentorship as well. Okay. And then lastly, other resources that you can learn from. These are things that I follow. So 80,000 hours curates a lot of information on different career paths, including the development sector. If you want to learn about different roles, devex.org is a place that lists all types, but these are mostly international. But on Facebook, there's development sector jobs, just so you have a feel of what the types of jobs are. And in terms of learning about development and how should development be done, ethically, morally, and that has respect for the rights of people, and how we could also be the most effective and efficient. Apart from EA, here are the two other go-to resources I have, which is Rethinking Development, which is a podcast, and Doing Development Differently. So I'm almost at the end of my talk. Sorry if I went over time, but just some final words. When you think about your career and where you can best contribute, just remember that it is really a journey. You have to open yourself up to possibilities, even if it looks scary at times. You have to be open to new experiences because, that's the only way where you'll find out. And, step by step, you can really come closer to a job that is uh, fulfilling for you, but also a job that helps others the most. So that's all for me. I have other couple of slides about EA. Do I still have time to think about that, to say about that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So if you're new to EA and these things resonate with you, I would also invite you to visit our website and also our Facebook page. Um, we also have a monthly newsletter that's coming out August 7th. We have a new one, a new edition. So you can sign up here if you want to learn more about opportunities, some resources available, and updates about our community. You can check it out there. And of course, we're also on social media. We have a special group for people who have joined EA events. So after this, you can definitely join right after. So yeah, I hope those things are quite helpful to all of you. Very happy to share about, effective altruism and also the development sector based on my experience and happy to answer questions after this. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya, for that insightful discussion. So before we get to the Q&A, I believe that Sir JP wants to share some insights from your talk.
Oh,
Yeah,
Hi,
sure.
Sir
yeah,
JP.
definitely. Yeah,
Sure.
Tanya. Nice to see you again, Tanya,
No,
online. Right. I know it's been
oh,
some
you're
time.
online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. The last time we met was 2019, before the 2018 for the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, personally I just wanted to like say, thank you, Tanya, for gracing this event. I know this is online and you're not able to like physically see the students, but yeah, your story really resonated with me. And I'm pretty sure it also resonated with a lot of students. That's why I want to share something also. I just want to share personally, like parang it's a testimony to what Tanya did mention, because I myself was also very confused about my career. So as you all know, I also tried to like help out the EA DLSU team in terms of the stuff in DLSU. But it's interesting also how Tanya's story is kind of similar to me, similar but not really similar. But yeah, and also I want to say thank you to the EA executive board and officers, Jib, Gwen, the rest of the folks for staging this event, even though it's online, no? Ang hirap talagang matuto ngayon with the online thing. So I just want to share my screen as well kasi when Tanya was mentioning her story, mabilis lang to. Like super parang very same kami. And I guess this is also sort of like a testimony that that career and development is not a linear thing. Sometimes there's a lot of like like crossroads and everything. So ito actually is a personal intro of me to my students in LaSalle. So I teach in LaSalle social entrepreneurship, and also I help sort of like mentors in a gym. But yeah, I just want to share. Do you guys see my screen also? Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sige. I-reuse ko na lang to. This is the same slides I use for my students in my class. Pero mabilis lang siya kasi baka hindi kayo makinig sa akin if puro talk lang. Kailangan may pictures. So anyway, ako naman, unlike Tanya, she's from UP, I'm from Ateneo. I graduated with a degree in management engineering many years ago. And that was me. Um, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar. Can I get a thumbs up from all of you if you are familiar with the management engineering degree course in Ateneo? Are you guys familiar? Yeah, okay. So I think some of you are. Yeah. So yeah, it's highly business, medyo mathematical, very analytical and stuff. So I'm pretty sure you have friends or like tito tita mga ganyan na nag-management engineering. And I also did a minor in development management. So unlike Tanya, I was actually a business guy. Very business, very finance. And the thing is that, but I knew there was a thug in my heart that I wanted to make a difference as well, just like Tanya, who was more into geared sociology and development studies, but I'm more of business, no? But yeah, when I was a college student like yourselves, right? Ako mismo confused ako at the time. Like I didn't even know what to do with my life. But yeah, I just stuck with ME because I wanted to finish it. There was some challenge, but a part of me was saying, I think it's also the if you belong to the to schools like Ateneo, LaSalle, UP, ganyan, UST, parang merong parang challenge, 'di ba, na parang you have to give back also. So fast forward, I graduated in Ateneo, but I pursued investment banking. So yeah, I was in different roles, global companies. I was even stationed in Australia and Singapore myself. And these are most of my colleagues in Singapore whom I spent a lot of time with. So in short, I never did development sector right after college. I was like, I just had to do, be stable. Yun sinasabi kanina ni Danya yung mga more of like financial rewards or stuff like that. So I was a little bit scared myself to do that. So yeah, parang ang layo-layo ng buhay ko noon dati compared to my life right now. So those were the people that I was working with. Long hours in the investment banking industry, very, very very pressured in a sense, pero it's also very rewarding. I think financially rewarding is the key there. But I knew way back that I didn't really want to stay in investment banking in the corporate sector for a long time. Long story short, in the Philippines, there was still the struggle, right, to help out, to see where I can do the most impact, just like what Tanya did mention about what EA is focusing on. So alam naman natin yan, and I think Tanya already mentioned those. Like there's just one on the upper left one is my photo with a good colleague of mine, an Australian friend of mine who was doing like parang a charity work in Malabon. Actually, we have been doing that. Long story short, after like almost a decade in the investment banking industry, I quit. I took the plunge. And I just really wanted to find a new life, something more meaningful and something more impactful. Bottom line, I switched from the corporate to the development sector not so long ago, from investment banking to more of social entrepreneurship, SME development, microfinance, and now teaching as well. And if you can see in that photo, just like Tanya, I did my master's abroad. I was in University of Hawaii under the Asian Development Bank scholarship program. So that was a sign. Siguro sometimes also I would probably like inject to what Tanya did mention. Sometimes there are also signs that tell you to move from one place to another, right, Tanya? I'm sure you would agree with me, like certain circumstances. So for me, having been granted that scholarship was like the way to go to the development sector. And now I do that. Um, in my life, in Hawaii, I was able to do an internship as well in Brazil, where we did like more of like a M&E, alam ni Tanya yan, more of like study and operational study on an NGO there. Kasi as we know, Brazil also has a lot of poor communities and marginalized communities. So very interesting, very similar to Tanya. But yeah, I wanted to take that back to the Philippines and to Asia. And now I work in naman, just like what Tanya did mention, an NGO, international NGO called Food for the Hungry, based in Phoenix, Arizona, as my full-time work. So we work in countries like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, and the rest of the folks, doing impact on the sectors or subset development sectors that Tanya was also mentioning about. Poverty and financial literacy and stuff like that. So very interesting lang. And now I work also as a part-time teacher in or part-time lecturer in LaSalle. So yun, magsa-stop na ako doon. The only reason why I shared that to all of you also is it's a testimony to what Tanya did mention, that at your age, it's okay to be confused. It's okay to not know what to do, but based on the guides that Tanya mentioned in this lecture or webinar, you can figure it out. And it's actually okay not to know it right now. Right, Tanya? Would you agree with me? It's okay to be confused right now as college students because this is the time to find yourself and what you're passionate about as well. So yun, medyo mabilis lang. Nakakatawa lang kasi parang yung slides na yun is
Oo nga,
almost
pareho
similar
tayo
to
ng
that.
slides.
Right. But yeah, that's the slide, Tanya, that I always show to my students naman in LaSalle. So
Yeah.
yun lang. Yeah, Tanya again. Yeah,
Hindi
go
tayo
ahead.
nag-usap ha. Hindi tayo nag-usap pero
Hindi
pareho
kami
tayo
nag-usap ni
idea.
Tanya at all. But yeah, I guess yun, magandang guide lang yun to also get to see that Tanya as our speaker, and we really appreciate her being here, one of the co-founders of EA Philippines. Ganon din yung experience niya, di ba? And me also being on the ground with sina Jib, sina Gwen, and the rest of the folks also experienced that. So I'm pretty sure our students would also probably experience that along the way, that sense of confusion and all. But I this talk really was very enlightening. Even I was very enlightened about your story, Tanya, as well. And I hope our students also are able to get pick something from the talk or from the sharing that you had. So yun lang. Thanks, Jib, Gwen. I know this is last minute, but also this is like the first time that we really met as a team,
And it's the
online. So
first
I just want to
official
share.
event of EA.
Yes, one of the, yeah.
So thank you, JP. Also thank you for
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, EA Executive Board and the rest of the folks. That's it from me.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
sir. Thank you,
you. Thanks.
Tanya.
So I think you got
Okay.
double your money for this event. You had 2 speakers.
Right. Napaka nag-resonate lang with me, Tanya. And hopefully our students also were able to pick a thing or two. Thanks, guys. Good job.
Okay, so now let's go to the Q&A portion. So let's open the Slido to see the question.
Yeah. Parang Miss Universe. Biglang.
Okay.
Alright.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll just read them out loud.
Yeah. Actually, I think I can. Yeah, please read them out loud.
You know. Okay. So as the first one, so Tanya, what can you say to the young people who feel like the world's not worth saving anymore?
Oh gosh, didn't we feel that
It's like
all the time?
Miss Universe.
Yeah, oh yeah, parang Miss Universe nga. You know what came to my mind the first time is that, okay, there's this member of the E community called Toby Ort, and he wrote a piece called The Precipice. And The Precipice talks about the end, the possible end of the world actually. But I got the most hope from that book because he said that when he thinks about working continuously for, the betterment of our world, he just thinks about all the ancestors before us who actually also worked so much to make us a better future. And it made me reflect on what ancestor do I really want to be moving forward. And I want to be that ancestor who didn't give up on the future so that, I could be enjoying the things we have now. So like ito, eyeglasses lang. Parang whoever invented this, parang thank you because I could see clearly. So like I want to be, I want to be part of, an ancestor that, really tried to work hard for future generations because it's something that I'm also enjoying now. Okay.
I like. Okay, so the next question is, what are your advices in cold networking with someone that aligns with the same advocacies or aspirations as you?
Okay, I think cold networking might be the last resort. I think if you know the theory of like 6 degrees of separation, there might always be someone who's connected to someone who's connected to someone. So it's always useful to start with a warm connection. But if that's totally out of the option, um, I feel that you should be confident enough to approach that person, but also make sure that the help or thing that you are asking is well thought of, right? Like, hindi lang siya bara-bara na, okay, you're just interested or excited. Like, start off with an introduction about yourself and also be very clear of what you want out of that connection to begin with so that that person can also take an action.
So thank you for that. The next one is, you mentioned that EA likes to do research into effective giving. Are there any local-based organizations that you would recommend?
Okay, so in EA, we are still of a view that as much as possible, we try to, support interventions that are found to be effective or really impacts the beneficiaries and thus the most good. So there are recommendations of by some EA organizations. We still think that, it would still be, if we're talking about 100 pesos, malayo pa rin yung mararating na 100 pesos if you donate it to a much poorer country, for example. But if you wanted to donate locally, EA Philippines did a research on these effective interventions here. And there were a couple of these effective organizations that are working in the Philippines. So organizations that does, vitamin A supplementation, because I have mentioned before, they have really quality evidence of doing that. You even have family planning and all that. So there are local organizations that we would recommend. We have a list. So whoever asked that, I can also share that list with you. So there are if you are interested. Yeah.
Okay. So we can send the link also to the Discord group
Yeah.
chat or
Okay.
okay. So the next one is, how to gracefully and sanely deal with colonialist views at work.
At work. Okay, this is very interesting because when you talk about development, you also question development by whom and development for. Who are we really trying to develop? Who benefits from all this, right? And most of the history of development or so-called progress had been, in the perspective of, let's say, more developed or Western countries. But it doesn't really rule out that ourselves are can develop in our own ways. So medyo tricky din to kasi syempre 'di ba when you say this is more of a neo-colonialist view na talaga, like how we perceive colonialism is different from how it is before. So I think the best way to really deal with this is to always have, the critical mindset, right? So have that critical mindset because that works whether it's, from a colonial perspective, it could be from, I don't know, a political perspective, it could be from a technical perspective. I think always having that critical mindset and just being also staying objective um, would be a key way to sanely deal with this, colonialist views. Because in the end, what we want is to do no harm in the people that we're helping, and also to make sure that they have their dignity intact in whatever intervention or program that we do. And I think that for me is, genuine development.
Okay. Okay. So the next one is, what exactly does a senior program officer do and how do you get there?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not sure if you really want to get into like the level I have now. I mean, there could be some other better position for everyone here. But just in my own personal case, because I'm really more of a generalist, I like getting things done. I like seeing the big picture. I like thinking about strategy. So a senior program officer is more of a manager. So I manage a program run by the embassy and I supervise it daily, making sure that we are on track on all the program's objectives for the month, for the quarter, for the year. I identify blocks like, okay, why is the partner not doing what they're supposed to do? What's hindering them from doing that? What can we do to make them be able to reach their goals? And it also has actually a lot of reporting because we're using taxpayers' money, not even Filipinos' taxpayers' money. So we have to make sure that all of that is accounted for and we are able to achieve the outcomes that the program has set to do. We also put in some safeguards. So, for example, are we looking at this program with a gender lens? Are we being inclusive? Are we being judicious in the use of the resources? So you're more of a all-around person, to be honest.
Okay. Also interesting. Okay. So the next one is, what is your opinion on content fatigue online and how can we efficiently communicate online?
Content fatigue online? What does that mean exactly? Nasaan yung question? I don't see it in Slido.
It's from it's here. I can send it in the Zoom chat. She
Ah,
sent it
okay.
to the Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. What does it mean exactly? Can the person elaborate on the question just so I can have a more targeted answer?
I asked the question.
Hi, Joel. Hi, yes.
So content fatigue, since now there's so much information online, like for example in a university setting, and sometimes it's difficult to absorb information. And so I wanted to ask how to efficiently communicate to others, especially now that online is our way of communicating.
Yeah, okay. I guess even now, like we are faced with all the problems around. There's a lot of stimulus online around us. I normally have I'm I'm not sure if I'm the right person to give advice because I sometimes feel overwhelmed as well. But I can give you some practical tips. Is that okay, Jewel?
Yes, that would be good.
Yeah, okay. So I think practical tips of communicating well, because when it comes to communication, you have to keep your audience in mind. So I think one of the best ways to make sure that you are effective is you're also targeting well who you are talking to. Because if you're just, talking to a big crowd and the people who needs to listen to your message doesn't hear about it, it won't get to where it should be. So I think a good targeting of people you want to communicate is a good step. And also understanding their language first, like what types of appeals or what types of, let's say, phrases or words or content appeals to that certain target the most would help. So I hope I made sense. Okay. Thank you then. Okay.
Okay, so the next question is, how do you deal with resistance in a target community that you are trying to develop?
Well, if you get resistance, then you have to rethink your intervention. Because there will always be resistance, but if the resistance is questionable, then because you could be resistant to change because you are used to doing things your way. But personally, um I would not endorse any type of development that is the community is not involved at some point. Like, I believe that they should always be consulted and they should always have complete buy-in in what is being done to their community. So if there is resistance, remember that it needs to be a conversation and a partnership with them. So even as yourself, you have to know when to stop or to pause or to rethink. But if you deal with resistance, yeah, you really need to understand where the community is coming from. So it's not pushing your agenda with them, but co-creating that agenda with them. And it's always useful to always highlight why that certain program, for example, benefits them. Because, it's all about incentives as well. What incentivizes people or communities to do some things, and usually it's how they benefit them. So if you're able to highlight that, then I think you would be able to effectively deal with them.
Thank you for that, Tanya. Okay, so the next one is, what are your suggestions on how to integrate the industry of tech to the development sector?
Okay, so there is really a lot. There are actually more groups in depth to this. So there are groups like data for social good or tech for good. So there are people that are really looking into this. But if you will ask me on a more short term perspective, like right now, even in terms of beneficiary targeting is such a problem for us. Just like the data systems that we have, if there's a better technology for that, then better. But in a more long termist perspective, maybe Jib would even know more about this than I am. But you can definitely use a lot of technology to help more of our long term problems, like yeah, if how we can make sure that technology is safe for us, that it doesn't really eat up into our humans productivity and then replace jobs and all that. So I think those are one of the ways that we can look into using technology for development as well. And technology is kind of a double-edged sword. It could be used for good, it could be used for bad. So if you can harness technology that does more good than bad, then in a way that it uplifts or tries to solve different problems within the development sector, then I think it would be of good use. Yeah, maybe it's just too technical for me, but there are other resources I'm sure that could also answer your question, and I can also share that after.
Okay. So the next one is, how might one reconcile working in development or social work under public service officials from institutions that have been deemed corrupt or negligent?
Oh yeah, okay. This is kind of a hard question. Um Iba kasi yung deemed corrupt or deemed negligent. So parang if it's proven that they're really corrupt, then I would suggest that, you don't take part of that anymore. But if it's something that you feel you are in a good position to influence the decision makers to correct their practices, um, then you would have to do it. Because I think if all the good people left those institutions, then it would just die down, right? And might not be able to do the work it set out to do. So, so for example, in the government, yeah, let's say you're still working there, and then there are allegations of corruption, then you could be one of the people who would ensure that they still follow the due processes that are needed to effectively do the work that they need to, despite the allegations of corruption. So be one of the rays of light within that organization if needed.
Thank you, Tanya. Okay, so the next one is, what specific metrics does EA use to determine how worthy a cause is?
Okay, so these are not straight out metrics, but there are ways to quantify or qualify them. But it's basically the three factors that we talked about: how much people you could impact positively, do you have a workable solution, and are those found effective, and then in terms of neglectedness, how much resources and how many people are working on them. So there are ways to do that. So for example, EA Philippines actually did a local research on mental health as a possible worthy cause of working on that area. So it will guide you through the different factors in terms of scale, neglectedness, and tractability that they had to go through and analyze that, and came up with a recommendation that it's a worthy cause to work on. So if you have a cause in mind, we could also share. Ang dami i-share na link, sorry. But I just can't talk about it here. But it's a full-blown study done by EA Blue students, mind you. So or EA Ateneo de Manila students. So I would challenge or even encourage EA DLSU students to come up with their own research on that solvability, tractability, neglectedness framework.
Okay.
Sorry, Hannah. Kung bibo lang naman kayo, gusto niyo lang naman. Yeah,
The pressure.
actually published in academia, and then we even had some DOH official, I think, who attended the talk or was in touch with us in the talk. So even as students, you are already like making some headway to do like really impactful things. Just a
Wow.
suggestion, Hannah, don't be afraid.
Okay, we'll try.
I'm just
Okay,
steering
so
some competition. The joke lang.
okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so the next one is oh no. I know someone pursuing sociology. How can I support her in her endeavors?
Okay. Wow. All right. So I was once like her before. What's ano endeavors? Pwedeng pa-elaborate. Is it looking for a career? Is it for advocacy or anonymous pa? Depende kasi sa endeavor, di ba?
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
It's
but I
anonymous.
mean, just to give a general, I guess you can say na, yeah, because at the time, if it's, um, I, it, I think it can be a bit, paralyzing to see that, you also have many options, but there are ways to, cut out those options, for her. So I think number one, you can assure her that, she has some options for her in her career and that you might be able to support her by trying to help explore what those options are in terms of starting out, again, this journey of self discovery and finding out what works for her. So maybe giving her opportunities where she will be able to know where she's good at, or she could try out certain career path that she's interested in would be good ways to support her.
Okay, so there's one. We'll just ask one last question, and for the rest, maybe we can just send an email to Tanya so you can get a direct answer.
Yes.
Okay, so the
Um,
last question.
Sorry, and also just to say, Bea, that I can also do one-on-one meetings. So one-on-ones, we could set our intention for the meeting if you want me to talk about more about the development sector or if you want me to talk about more about EA. We can have that one-on-one and yeah, just have a chat for 30 minutes and see where I can help you. So it can also be exploratory.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. Okay, so let's get to the last question. So, working in development entails high stress and patience while consistently being made to deal with various people. How might an undergrad be more career fit here?
Oh, okay. I think a lot of, I know undergrads do a lot of group work, don't you guys?
Yeah,
Really?
for me, yeah, we do.
Yeah. So for me, sobrang training siya having to deal with different people during group work. See how you are in terms of group dynamics. Um, I even honestly, I think students now handle a lot more stress than we did during our time. Maybe JP could also, I don't know. I just feel that students are more stressed now
I
than
agree, Tanya. Yeah,
we
especially with
were.
the online mode, I think.
Yeah, even with
Yeah,
online mode, with social media. I mean, I did have to deal with social media to be honest. So I think you folks do undergo a lot of stress more than we did before. But I can, say from experience that there are also more available ways how to manage the stress than before. So I think it helps. Like I said, in terms of dealing with stress and dealing with, high stress situations, it's always helpful now that you have these tools like meditation. Oh my God, we didn't even do that during my time, like you can try to meditate, you can talk to someone, your counselors to handle stress. You can, yeah, do so one thing I learned is you can do therapeutic life changes. So these are, exercising more, eating well, sleeping well to begin with, just the basics. Start with the basics. And that could, improve your mood and how you handle and react to situations less stressful or, I mean, in a more responsive way than just being stressed. And then working with other people, I think you should really um, bank on your experience now, working in groups, working in organizations like this, creating your student projects, because you will only really work up those muscles for high stress situations or building emotional immunity when you put yourself in situations that will um, kind of make you more used to those types of work. So I think LaSalle gives out those opportunities to be more involved in organizations like EA or other organizations, or like in group work to deal with other people. So there.